Few other shows on television can match the brutality and shockingly uncompromising narrative of The Boys. This diabolical take on superheroes in a twisted world gets darker with each passing episode, and now that we're into the final season, the sky is the limit as we all expect the unexpected. But the reality is that in many cases, the show narrative is a toned-down version of the darker source material, which makes you wonder how unhinged the comic book by Garth Ennis and Darick Robertson actually gets. In fact, some of the most iconic and memorable moments in the show carry a completely different weight when you understand what they're adapted from. In this video, we'll be exploring 8 such moments that are actually way more disturbing than you thought if you aren't familiar with how things go down in the comic books. Maybe the faint of heart should stay away from this video because things are about to get uncomfortable. Let's get into it. Mother's Milk's name has a dark secret. We've all grown to love Mother's Milk as one of the most honorable members of The Boys, and the character, played by Laz Alonso in the show, strikes the balance in the team that keeps things going. Mother's Milk dealt with a soup tragedy as a child when his grandfather was accidentally killed by Soldier Boy during one of his reckless missions. His father tried to fight Vought, but justice eluded him, and he eventually passed away, leaving MM a truckload of trauma and vengeance in mind. In the show, he's the one questioning some of Billy Butcher's controversial methods, and he's a pretty level-headed guy who's resourceful and a pretty solid fighter on top of that. But have you ever wondered how he got such a strange name? Well, let's quickly cut to the comic book pages, because that version of MM is very different from his TV series counterpart. For starters, in the comics, he has superpowers, and the origin of this superpower is what gets him his name. His real name is actually Baron Wallace, and his mother worked in a Vought warehouse, which was a laboratory for Compound V. She unknowingly became exposed to trace amounts of this soup-creating concoction when she was pregnant, and this mutated her and her unborn children. MM's twin brother was born with severe mental disabilities, and he had it much better with his super strength and durability that increased with age, alongside a regenerative healing factor, but this came at a cost because the Compound V that was the source of his powers came from his mom's breast milk. This is actually what keeps him alive, and whenever his mother tried to wean him off it, he nearly died. Thus, the comic book version gives you a grown man who still needs to be breastfed regularly by his elderly mother to survive, because stopping simply isn't an option. What happened to his family and his mother gives him a righteous reason to be a part of the Boys, and after he accidentally knocked the head off his opponent during a boxing match, he became a part of the soup hunting team. We do understand why the showrunners decided to omit this origin story because it's not dignified or presentable, but now you know that's the reality behind his strange name. Homelander and Maeve abandoning the plane. Who could forget one of the most disturbing moments from The Boys Season 1? Homelander and Queen Maeve are tasked with stopping some hijackers who have taken over an aircraft, but the rescue attempt goes horribly wrong. It starts well after they force their way into the plane and kill a couple of hijackers, but one of the hijackers gets inside the pilot's cabin, and while trying to take him down, Homelander uses his laser beams a bit too overzealously. Both the hijacker and the pilot are killed, and the instrument panel is melted away, making sure there's no way to land the plane safely. Despite Queen Maeve's pleas to save the passengers, or at least one young girl, Homelander coldly points out that saving even one will expose the failure of their mission, and he lets the plane crash. Later, he uses the footage of the crashed aircraft to further his rhetoric, and this is a defining moment for his character because it convinces you just how evil he really is. This storyline with the plane actually happens in the source material as well, but the event has a darker turn of events than what you see here. In the comics, it's not just Homelander and Maeve, but the entire 7 who attempt to stop the hijacking, and this event exposes the lack of rational planning from Homelander, and of course, things go horribly wrong. It starts off with Homelander asking the 7 to block the path of the plane to scare the terrorists, and then his plan is to go inside the aircraft using the forward doors on both sides. While forcing the door open, a kid flies out, and Homelander doesn't bat an eyelid and doesn't even attempt to save him. Once inside, all the passengers beg the heroes to save them, but Homelander shows no sensitivity and yells at them to keep quiet. Meanwhile, the hijackers have locked themselves inside the pilot's cockpit, and Deep does something remarkably stupid by breaking all the glass in the plane, and with all the air inside, it becomes difficult for Homelander to move freely. He does manage to enter the cockpit, but ends up killing the pilot along with the terrorists. Now there's no way for him to land the plane safely, and after an altercation with Maeve, Homelander flies out of the aircraft, choosing to abandon the flight to its fate. However, Marathon follows him and tells him that he can't allow the plane to crash into the city. Eventually, Homelander flies into the plane at full speed, and it splits the aircraft in half, killing several passengers. The ones who survive die when the plane crashes into the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's a complete disaster. Still, we'd say that the show does well to capture the inhuman nature of Homelander when he shows no emotions as the plane crashes due to his mismanagement.
Connect 4.
Oh, you cheeky little blighter.
Every scene of Butcher and Ryan together. We would say that Billy Butcher's interactions with Ryan are probably some of his most humane moments in the show, and the fact that he actually cares for the kid makes it one of his redeeming qualities. Maybe his only one, honestly. After all, Ryan is the son of his deceased wife Becca and Homelander, and the young boy turns out to be a rather powerful soup. As for Butcher, he spent his life hating Homelander, and after finding out about his wife Becca having a son with him, it could have been the farthest thing from a bond. But the real surprise comes later, when he finds out that Becca, who he assumed was dead, is still alive and living with her son, Ryan. Later, she makes him promise that he'd take care of Ryan, and so he does, even when it means taking on Homelander in life-threatening situations. The kid even likes him back, and the relationship between the two is heartening to watch through the ups and downs. It doesn't end well in Season 4, when Ryan shows signs that he has some of Homelander's defining traits, but even then, it's heartening to see the two together when they do get some screen time. However, the comic book has no such adorable connection because there's no grown Ryan at all. In fact, in the comics, this is a big part of what drives Billy Butcher into becoming a founding member of the CIA-backed anti-superhero team, The Boys. His wife Becky was assaulted by Homelander, and she hid it from Billy even though it resulted in pregnancy. In what we consider to be one of the most shocking moments in the books, and that's saying something, the baby in the womb shows signs of superpowers manifesting early. Sadly, the superpowered fetus rips right out of Becky's womb and kills her. The baby also tries to kill Billy with his laser sight, and he's forced to beat it to death with a lampstand. I mean, he did do it for survival, as a desperate measure, but it's still graphic and disturbing. Moreover, we can't get over the appearance of the baby in the comic book with glowing red eyes, a developed body, and grown teeth covered in his mother's blood. We think it was a smart choice by the showrunners to let Ryan live and give Butcher a reason to become something other than a revenge-filled monster, and of course it's not permanent, but it's still better than this horrid comic book version, right? The entire Herogasm episode. Honestly, we never expected the show to go through with Herogasm in the first place, but it did. You have this twisted private gathering of superheroes, and in Season 3, the boys end up at this yearly gathering as they track down Soldier Boy. As it turns out, this gathering is actually a massive superhero orgy at the house of the TNT twins. The show also reveals that this is a tradition set into motion by Soldier Boy back in the 1950s, and it's a private event that has no Vought involvement. This depraved house party was so extreme that Amazon actually put a content warning before the episode because it was shocking even by The Boys' standards. But the Herogasm that we know from the comic books is very different from what we got in the Amazon series. In the funny books, it's actually a Vought American operation, and every soup on the planet is involved. Homelander comes up with a cover story about a deadly alien threat, which is a completely fabricated story that everyone believes. The governments are assured that every soup is out there saving mankind when they're actually on a private island resort for a week-long orgy funded entirely by Vought. They conduct this as a yearly management tool, and it helps in keeping the soups happy and loyal. We love how the show's Herogasm has been toned down considerably, and it's more of a debauched party. The real horrors of the event are realized when you learn that the comic book uses it as a tool of the corporation to make the entire world look away and keep the soups in control.
I can be your mommy.
So you love me?
Homelander's childhood flashbacks. It's not often that we feel bad for Homelander, but his childhood flashback in the show surely does the trick. I mean, how much can you hate a twisted soup for being that way because of how he was raised? There are these flashback sequences in the show that reveal how he grew up in a laboratory under clinical conditions. Even as a baby, he was denied basic human contact, and he was always treated like a weapon who needed to be preserved carefully. There were experiments conducted on him, and this young boy was never really taught how to be human, which eventually results in the psychopath that we see as an adult. It's quite unsettling because you understand Homelander's childhood issues, attachment problems, and his obsession for motherly love and breast milk, but do you know where all this comes from? Well, the comic books have a slight twist to the whole tale, because Homelander wasn't born but grown in a Vought facility. At the same time, Vought also developed Black Noir, a direct clone of Homelander, enhanced even further for the sole purpose of killing him if he went rogue. He was placed among the Seven as a permanent hidden assassin, and after he spent years without purpose, he was driven insane. The comic version of Black Noir would often dress up as Homelander and commit atrocities in his name and sent the evidence to the boys. This is actually the shocking source of several twists in the comic book narrative, because a lot of Homelander's most heinous crimes were actually the work of Black Noir. While the show is focused on the twisted upbringing that ruined the man, the comic book context is even more horrifying because Vought develops a secret counter-program to end his life from the moment he was created.
Here today will prove that Vought is guilty of corporate malfeasance and multiple felonies.
Victoria Neuman versus Vic the Veep. We don't know about you guys, but we always admired Victoria Neuman because of how smart her whole game is. This seemingly progressive congresswoman is actually one of the deadliest soups in the show, and she can make people's heads pop by manipulating their blood flow. She seemingly fights against Vought through her policies, but she's actually doing the bidding of Stan Edgar, who guides her. Of course, things go in a very different direction eventually, and her cover is blown with time, but that takes nothing away from her overall dignified presence. Even with such a frightening power, we think it's safe to say that her intelligence is actually deadlier. However, her equivalent character in the comic books is a guy named Victor Neuman, aka Vic the Veep. The show changes the gender, personality, and just about everything because Vic the Veep is a man, and he's an explicit parody of George W. Bush. He's presented as a wealthy and dim-witted man who's quite controllable and becomes the vice president of the US courtesy of Vought, who needs a puppet in the office. Also, he has no such head-exploding powers in the comics, and we can hardly dub him as cunning because he does exactly what Vought tells him to. We wouldn't say it's any worse or better because in both cases, it's Vought who comes out on top. It's just that in the show, Victoria Neuman puts up some real resistance, and in the comics, Vic the Veep is nothing more than a silly puppet. Kimiko was never given a name. We think just about everybody has a soft spot for Kimiko Miyashiro in the show, as she's easily one of the most emotionally resonant characters. You've got to feel for her character development as she goes from a trauma victim to someone who's capable of love and connection, and in the final season, we even get to see her speak. The show gives her a name, a proper backstory, and a romance with Frenchie that makes her more human than ever, but the comic book narrative never cared to name her, and she is always referred to as the female of the species. Also, there's a heartbreaking backstory where her mother worked in a laboratory that worked with Compound V. As a toddler, she crawled into a vat of Compound V, and this resulted in supreme strength and an urge for violence. The scientist who found her got his entire face ripped off, and she was thrown into a cage for safekeeping. She was experimented on ruthlessly until the boys rescued her, and she remains selectively mute for much of the narrative, speaking only in the final issues. Maybe the intent in the show was to add to the human element, because every scene with Kimiko is a version of the character that the comics never allowed to exist at all. We think that this is the clearest example of the show choosing grace over nihilism.
Oh my God. Hi, my Nana's your biggest fan. I'm Stormfront.
Stormfront was originally worse than you think. That's a loaded statement, right? How can it get worse than being a literal Nazi? I mean, Stormfront is despicable and disgusting in the show, but the comic book version will make you think her show counterpart is a Disney princess. In the show, Stormfront is the former wife of Frederick Vought, who founded it all, and has now been repackaged as a cool social media star in soup. The show reveals that she's still a Nazi at heart, and she embodies everything one should hate, from her racist nature to her scheming ways. For us, one of the most satisfying moments in the show was when she was charred beyond recognition by Ryan, and it was a fitting end to a Nazi-loving weirdo. The comic books had a different version of Stormfront altogether, and here, he is a male soup created in Nazi Germany as the first successful superhero experiment. He fights for the Third Reich during the Second World War and is involved in several Nazi atrocities. Later, in a sort of parody on Nazi scientists being brought to America by the US government, Stormfront is brought to America by Vought and rebranded as a completely new soup. What makes this even more interesting is that his DNA is used as a genetic source to create Homelander, and it shows the harsh reality of soups, where most so-called modern heroes descended from a Nazi experiment. Also, while the show has Stormfront's past catch up to her, the comic book narrative keeps the origin hidden for decades as he poses as a patriotic American soup. Both versions of Stormfront are abominations without a doubt, but somehow the comic version is even worse than the one we get in the show. You see what I'm getting at, don't you? All these instances don't necessarily suggest that the comic version is a lot darker and more disturbing, even though it is in most cases. What the purpose of this video is really is to give you some context about what you see in the series and how it changes your whole outlook. The Boys comic series is not everybody's cup of tea, and should you choose to explore it, be prepared for some unexpected moments of brutality, gore, and other despicable stuff, and if the TV series is harsh for you, maybe skipping the comics would be for the best. As you hopefully see by now, the show is actually trying to spare us some of the more gruesome horrors of the comics. That said, we'd love to know in the comments below what you think of these gruesome moments, and tell us about the most disturbing thing according to you, especially if it didn't make it on our list today. Also, if you like this video, please hit those like and subscribe buttons to tell us you want to see more of this kind of stuff, and we'd be happy to oblige. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one.